start with an addition problem where I would like us to look at this as adding 4 negative 3's together. Multiplication of two signed numbers can be looked at as repeated addition. The reason we are taking the time to approach multiplication of signed numbers this way is that students oftentimes confuse the rules between addition and multiplication until they have solidified in their mind. So if we are confusing the rules between these two operations, it may help to return to the number line and, in this case, see this as adding 4 negative 3's together. 4 negative 3's together, added together, equal negative 12. Of course, the same as a positive 4 multiplied by a negative 3. Now here you can interpret this one as the opposite of 4 times a negative 3. You know that a positive times a negative is a negative, and the opposite of a negative is a positive. So the rule, a negative times a negative, is a positive. Here are the rules for multiplying two signed numbers. Let's sort out the signs for the quotient of two signed numbers. What we'll learn is that the rules for division are the same as the rules for multiplication because they are inverse operations of one another. Now, if we're struggling with a positive divided by a negative, perhaps looking at what we would need to multiply the negative 2 by to get the positive 6 will help. And what you've just learned is that a negative multiplied by a negative will give you the positive 6. Therefore, the result of a division problem, this one, needs to be negative. Here are the results dividing two signed numbers. Again, multiplication and division are inverse operations. We find the rules to be the same as for multiplication. Let's move on to multiplying more than just two signed numbers. Since we know the rules for multiplying two signed numbers, start with that. So replace the two negatives with a positive. Now you're back to two numbers, and we have previously discussed this result. One more before we summarize the results. For this one, we'll multiply the first two negatives together, and then we'll multiply the last two negatives together. So this brings you to two numbers, a positive times a positive, and you know this result. If you look closely over the last examples we have done, you will find that a product of an even number of negatives results in a positive, and an odd number results in a negative. Let's move on to sort out division with 0. I guess at this point, if we didn't know the results, we would have a 50-50 chance of getting them right. To sort them out, let's go back to undoing this with multiplication. Whatever we find with 5 divided by 0, 0 times this number must equal 5. What you know is that 0 times any number is always 0. Therefore, we're never going to find a way to get 5. Division by 0 is undefined since we cannot undo it. To sort this one out, let's try to undo it with multiplication. Can you find something to multiply by 5 to get 0? Well, you can. 0. 0 divided by 5 is 0. If 0 is the second number, the result is undefined. If 0 is the first number in your division, the result is 0. Here we're asked to simplify. We're going to need the order of operations. Parentheses around the numerator and the denominator are implied. We move on to the numbers in exponential form first. Notice how I've taken the numbers in exponential form off to the side. If there were parentheses, I keep those, and if there wasn't, I shouldn't put them in since that would change the problem. It is extremely important that we understand what is intended for the base. So here's a way to look at that. What is immediately in front of the exponent is what needs to be squared. If there are parentheses, square all that is in the parentheses. If it is just a constant, only the number gets squared, not also the sign. So here are the numbers expanded out to show you what needs to be squared. And here we're putting the results back into the problem. and then if necessary, rewrite the subtraction as addition. You might find that you're at the point where you no longer need to do that. But if you aren't, take the time to do so to avoid errors. We're to the point where we have a negative divided by a positive. We discussed this rule earlier in this lesson. It is not unusual for students to mix up the sign rules between addition and multiplication. If you are struggling with them, review this lesson as many times as necessary to be comfortable with them.